Hello and welcome to the HIPAA Vault show, where we discuss all things HIPAA compliance in the cloud. My name's Adam Zenadine, and I'm joined by Gil Vidal, CTO of HIPAA Vault. Hey, Gil.
Hey, Adam. Welcome to the podcast end of Friday. Hope you're doing well.
Happy Friday. Yes, I'm doing very well, thanks. And you?
Hey, doing great. Ready to get started.
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of moving house over the next week or so. And, I was thinking a lot about the, moving and, moving items, moving furniture, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a good time for us to discuss migration from one data center to another. So with that in mind, we're going to be talking today about migrating from private data centers to Google Cloud, and specifically when it comes to VMware. Our last week's episode touched on, pricing models for VMware and how they've been changing recently, and so we've seen an increased demand to shift away from the private data center model and look into Google Cloud because they offer competitive pricing for customers that want to stay within the VMware environment. So, coming at it from the aspect of like moving house and keeping it kind of simple, what I've been doing over the past couple of months, obviously, is a fair amount of planning to move. We're moving from about the same size house, 3-bedroom to another 3-bedroom. And so the planning has been, what furniture are we going to be keeping? How do we need to move it? What additional stuff do we need when we move into the new house? Just taking an inventory. Obviously, we chose the house based on a neighborhood, options around. And then after the assessment and planning, there's preparing for the move. So am I going to get some movers to come and do the moving for me? What days am I going to do it on? How much time do I have? Those kind of things went into whether we're going to hire help and how much help we're going to hire. And then there's the actual day of the move. What equipment do we need? Stuff like that. And then there's setting up the house once we move over. So I think, using that analogy, I think we can probably talk a little bit about the migration on the VMware side. I think it probably starts with in the same way that a house move starts with a bit of assessment and planning, right? So how does that transpire private data center to Google Cloud?
Yeah, no, I like your analogy. The moving from one house to the other. Seems simple, right? It's just stuff, just move it, but it's more complicated because of all the steps involved. But I did want to back up a little bit and tell the audience that is in that painful situation where the VMware license cost has skyrocketed because Broadcom has purchased VMware and has decided for some segment of their customers to increase the price by, we've heard, 5 times to 10 times. We don't really know exactly. It's painful though. I mean, the point is, it wasn't just your typical, recessionary 10-15%. No, this was many multiples, 5, 6, 7, 800%. If you're paying that much, maybe moving to the Google VMware platform. So Google has VMware within the Google platform. And you may not either A, be aware of that, or B, you were aware of it, but at some point it was more expensive. Let's say in the past it was 10 or 15 points, 20% more expensive than what you currently have. And so that wasn't an option for you. But now that your price has gone up 5 to 10x, now the Google solution seems very cheap. I think this solution is going to work well. Now, Adam and I looked at this together and we realized that this is for somebody. What was the entry level cost, Adam, that we did some calculation? Was it 10 or 20,000 per month?
Yeah, it was around 10,000.
10,000. Okay. Yeah. About 10,000 entry points. So obviously, if you only have a few virtual machines, then this is not going to be the right solution. But this is meant for someone who's got dozens and dozens of systems, and their bill has just gone astronomically high, and they're looking for a better solution. So here's a great solution for you in the Google Cloud. But then we have to migrate. So how do you migrate? What do you do? And like he said, when you're moving house, first you got to take inventory of what you have. So you'd have to full inventory list. And in VMware, that's easy, right? You can go to your inventory tab and just click on that and say, okay, this is what I have. This is how much CPU, how much RAM. Give me my price. What do I need to do to get into Google VMware, the VMware engine? And we can say, okay, here's how much RAM, CPU. And so that's the inventory step. And getting it costed out is the next step too, to figure out, okay, is this cost going to be acceptable? Is it within your budget? So I would say those are the first two steps, Adam, is get the inventory, get a quote, make sure you understand if this is in your budget. And at least you'll have a plan then.
Okay, so you got the inventory, you know what you know how much the new house is going to cost for the data center to run. You're happy with that. What else is there on the planning side? I'm assuming there's some sort of connection that needs to be established between the two data centers.
Yeah, for the actual move, there's an appliance that Google makes available, and I was just looking at my screen because I forgot what it stands for, but it's called VMware HCX.
Yeah, hybrid cloud extension.
Yeah, hybrid cloud extension. It says abstracts vSphere-based resources in your VMware environment and cloud resources and presents them to applications as one continuous resource, creating a hybrid infrastructure. We would have to set that up, this HCX extension, and that has to be, that's one of the first steps you have to do. So you deploy the HCX Cloud Manager appliance, and then that's what's going to be your tool for doing the migrating. So that this tool will see both environments. It'll see your current environment, and then it'll see the new Google environment. So it's sort of a bridge point. So that's pretty neat that Google makes that available.
So it's almost like when you're packing the boxes up in the house, you write, this box is for the living room and it has these contents in it, so that when it moves to the other house, you know what the purpose of the box is and what the contents are, right? So you install the extension in your existing environment and your Google Cloud environment so that it can map. I think that's what it's doing here. It's mapping where that virtual machine is and where it's going to be and all the connections that it needs.
Yeah, and I think it makes it simpler in the sense that this bridge is going to be aware of both environments. So it's going to see your whole inventory on the left side. Say that's where you are now. Say the left side is where your current platform is, your VMware, vSphere, and then on the right side is blank because that's the Google Cloud. That's your VMware vSphere platform. On the right side, there's nothing there. And then it can say, okay, let's plan the migration. Like, is this going to be a cold migration? You're going to power off systems and move them? Is it going to be a vMotion where it's live? You're going to say, this thing, I want to say live during the move. Or is it going to be a bulk move? You're going to say, hey, take all these, Saturday, I'm going to power off these 20 systems and just start moving them over the weekend. So you have to decide how you want to perform the migration and scheduling them. So how, meaning, do you want a system powered on or off? Do you want it in bulk, or are you going to do it just single one at a time?
And that probably depends on the nature of what's running in the data center, right? Whether they're applications that are being used 24/7, how critical they are.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. If it's, we have a lot of customers that say, well, it's very critical Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, very critical. But on the weekend, they relax. They're like, oh, yeah, nobody's in the office. No one's in the medical office. So we don't care. You power it up, do whatever you want. So that's good to know. Now, I have seen cases where a big behemoth of a VM takes more than 2 days to move. That sounds ridiculous. But if the bandwidth at the origin location is weak or something, there's some reason that's just big and there's slow network.
Big files, yeah.
Yeah, they could take a long time. So if you're thinking, oh, that's fine, I'll move it Saturday morning at 8 a.m., it'll be done at, in the evening, you'd be surprised. You might say, oh my gosh, it's Sunday at midnight, this thing's not done. What if business hours start and this thing hasn't finished? What am I going to do? So you have to think about that in your planning, like what are the size of these systems? And you could do a test migration. You could try to migrate, when you migrate, the last step is to cut over the DNS and the IP so that even though it's migrated, there's one more step. So the system's migrated, it's there, but you have to update your DNS to point to a new IP address. So, but you could always test this whole thing and say, okay, how long did it take to migrate that machine? With these tools, what's really neat, Adam, too, is that it starts to copy everything over. But right before you cut over, it'll do one more copy. It'll make sure that everything is completely synced right before you cut over and say, okay, I'm done with the old one. I'm going to use a new one. And then there's this cutover point at which now this one is live and the other one is the legacy one.
Okay.
So that's kind of a view, high level view of how this works. What we talked about now is good. It's more for planning and just kind of getting a general understanding. But the next podcast, we can get more into the nitty gritty details, get into the weeds, as they say, on the technical side. And we can break it down from that point of view. I think that might be useful.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we can do that.
Great. Well, good. Well, this was a good conversation. I hope the audience is encouraged to know that there's an out. When you're looking at your bill, it's important that instead of just being shocked about your new bill, so we've gotten contacted by companies like, oh my gosh, you have no idea, my bill's gone up this high. And it's always a rush. It's like, oh, we got to move out, in 5 days because our billing cycle, in 5 days, we're going to have to pay this new bill. We want to move out. Well, you can't move out necessarily that quickly. It depends on how many systems you have. So it's good that you plan. Give yourself a full month. It's like if you heard this podcast and now you're in a hurry, like, well, let's get a hold of Adam here. Let's get that quote. Let's get going. But consider a month's time frame would probably be a reasonable time frame, especially if you have a big number of systems. It could take a while by the time you plan it, get the right teams together and everything. It's going to take a little while. Now you say, well, a month's too long. I need to be out in a week. Well, I'm just saying a month is on the outside, right? I mean, if it's a real big, complex VMware setup that you have currently, and you want to keep that working the same way, well, it's going to take time if it's that complex. Now, if you just have 100 systems and they're kind of just doing their own thing, there's not a lot of interconnectivity between them. They're just sort of independent servers doing their thing. Then maybe that wouldn't take as long.
Yeah. And to finally go back to the house analogy, if you only have a couple of days to move house, that might be an indication of some larger problems at hand in the organization. And so be prepared for a certain amount of chaos during that time because, there's a good amount of planning that goes into this thing. So it might be a case of, okay, we need to move quick. So what are the critical systems that can't fail? We'll migrate them over and the rest we can kind of do.
Right.
With a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's all for this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, thanks for stopping by.